She's an incredible swimmer. She swam over.
The cheapest way to swimming over the ocean. Running all the way to the country. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll get.
Should we talk about what a typical day looks like? That'd be pretty cool.
That's a great question. Yeah.
I've never really seen an orphanage that runs and stuff.
Yeah, they're all a little different. Yeah. But
What would you say what was your biggest success? What do you think?
And you got 10 minutes.
Just
use
if you
it.
talk
Yeah,
about
so-
success, you might want to talk about failure too.
Mm.
If you don't mind.
yeah.
One of
There's
your biggest.
a lot of that there too.
Oh, there's a- yeah.
I always find it interesting. You always when missionaries come and speak, like they just give you the glamour. They don't give you the real life.
Yeah.
And like we have this idea that when we're over on the mission field doing God's work, like even in the trials, like we're just going to be joyful. Like we're going to be like Paul, even though we're being stoned, we're going to be praising God and singing hymns, right? But it doesn't matter if you're in Rwanda or if you're here and you're suffering. Like it doesn't feel different. You don't have more joy just because you're doing God's work. Like the challenges are
Good point. Yeah.
just as challenging, but maybe even more so because you don't have the fellowship and the church can, and your family and all that, like to support you through it. So definitely it's dangerous when people have that idea and they go out there, because you see a lot of people completely broken and walk away from the faith that are on the mission field because of what they face, and they didn't expect it to be like that. But
That's a great point.
so my story starts, I guess, when I was about 7 years old. I had this really vivid dream at night where I had this picture where I was in Africa helping kids, and I remember like the picture of it, and I felt like God was calling me to help start centers for vulnerable kids. So I wake up and I go and tell my parents, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Hillary."
7 years old.
Yeah, oh sure, honey.
Yeah, right. Wow.
But yeah, I just knew that God was giving me a vision of what he wanted me to do. And so I remember growing up, I was like, man, am I supposed to be like Jonah? Like Jonah was only 14 when he went, like, and he was called to Nineveh. Should I just like go now? My mom was like, no, you have to go through high school. So after high school, I went to Mexico for a year and helped out an orphanage. And like all throughout my life, I just knew that God was calling me to Africa at some point. And so then in high school, or in Mexico, I had another dream at night about being like just kind of in this barren place. And there's all these like street kids, like kids that didn't have a home. And in my dream, I started like praying for and working with these kids. And I shouted out to God, like, who's going to help these kids? They have no family. They have no one to take care of them. And I woke up to a voice saying, you are. And so when I got back from Mexico, I was like, okay, God, like, finally, I'm going to go out there. So I applied to, like, 20 different organizations and in East Africa, because I was pretty confident that's where God was directing me to go.
Okay.
And none of them responded except two, and they said that I couldn't come with their organization. So I was like, okay, God, like, I'm really trying to, like, push it, because you've made it clear that you've wanted me to be in Africa. Like, you told me 12 years ago, so if you want me to go, you're going to have to make it happen, because I'm done pushing it.
Right.
And so it was only like a couple weeks later, I get this email from an acquaintance named Megan, who went to the same youth group as me, and she was like, hey, Hillary, I'm doing an internship for SPU in Rwanda for 2 months teaching English at a church, and I heard you were interested in missions. Do you want to come? Wow. And so I was like, yes, I would love to come. Let me pray about it. And then we ended up being in Rwanda together 3 months after that. So Rwanda definitely was a little different than I pictured it. Like, you kind of picture, like, world concern, like, you know, everyone having these big bellies and people in, like, tribal clothes around or something.
Right.
But Rwanda is very civilized. You know, they have, at least, like, the downtown area, Kigali City. You know, it looks like a city. They're starting to build some buildings higher than 6 stories. That was the tallest building when I was there. But now they have, like a 22-story building or something. So they're developing very quickly right now. It's very green. It rains more there a year than it does here. Here's downtown Kigali when I was there on one of the streets. This is the more rural area, so it's very green and lush. It's an agricultural country.
Nice, thank you.
Oh, it's kind of going through itself. Yeah, here's a moto taxi. You take little motos, or like these vans are the bus system. Wait, I don't want you to see these ones yet.
Okay.
It's gonna stop eventually. But yeah, so it's definitely a little different than I pictured. Rwanda. Do any of you know about the 1994 genocide?
Absolutely. Yes.
Everyone?
Hotel Rwanda?
Yeah, I watched the movie.
I hear that it's intense. They say don't watch that, but I like war stuff.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since I've been there. I'm kind of.
You really haven't?
I've seen it. I saw it before I went.
Before you went, okay.
But it's kind of
Saw
like
before you went?
yeah.
Wow.
And I read a book too. It was weird because you would get there and like you're walking around and it's really pretty in the city and you're just imagining like, oh my gosh, what happened on these streets? And you know that people were massacred like all over.
Yes.
And so you're just kind of like envisioning it, like what happened here? At that point, it was 16 years ago or something. No, I guess I was there.
Very long.
I went there in 2008, so I was 20.
Why did they do that again?
Ethnic
Cleanse.
rivalry.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so there's still a lot of that tension there. And that's the sad thing about Christianity in Rwanda. It doesn't really transcend into a lot of the believers. Like your first identity is your ethnic group. And so they say that maybe 80% of Rwanda is Christian, but 80% of the people killing their neighbors in the genocide were also Christian. Right? It's the same statistic goes both places.
Wow.
And Islam is actually growing because in the genocide, the Islams, they were like the safe havens. Like they weren't really taking part of the genocide. And so people started converting to Islam afterwards, which is ironic. Like Islam is usually not known for being the peaceful ones in Africa.
Usually they're more aggressive.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you were Hutu or Tutsi,
Mm-hmm.
if you were a Muslim, you weren't participating pretty much in that.
Yeah, at least not as many did. I'm sure there are some that did.
That's quite a testimony there.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
But part of it might be because Islam really was more rooted in the people that were calling themselves Muslims. I don't know. And how people use Christianity. If anyone says they're a Christian.
Right.
Yeah, they also use Christianity, like the Bible, out of context to promote the war, saying that the Tutsis were the serpents and you need to crush their head and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's still a big tension now. If you go there, you don't know it as a foreigner. They're very reserved. They're not very open or direct, and they're passive aggressive. So that's just an undercurrent that you I'm able to see after being there for 4 years how deep it still runs and the division it causes. But it's an unspoken thing right now. But so hopefully we'll be able to help raise up new generations that end the mindset of hatred towards the other tribe.
Hillary, may I ask a quick question? What was the guesstimates of the massacre?
They guess up to 20% of the population was killed in 1994 genocide. So that was in a 3-month span.
20%?
Up to 20% of the population.
A million? How many?
So it's between 500,000 and 1 million.
Wow.
Were killed. So yeah. And the country is the size of Maryland, of the state of Maryland.
Oh my goodness. So very small.
It's the most highly or densely populated per capita country in Africa.
And when you said massacre, it was a massacre. This was
That is a massacre.
this was not a this was not something where they just lined them up like the Nazis and shot them with guns.
It is with machetes was the item of choice to kill people.
Cut them,
so
cut them, yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, I was reading this book about it too. Like, the people that were doing it, like, they would go out and kill people for 8 hours, and then they would come home and they're just, like, so exhausted, and they're just, like, eating and sleeping all day, and then, like, go out, because it was, like, hard work, and, like, the way it was describing, like, what these people are doing, it was so
Like their job.
disgusting. You know, they would go to safe havens, like, orphanages, too. Like, there's an orphanage you can go, and you see the bones of all the kids. And like there's no differentiating between a baby or a pregnant woman or a man. Like it was just pure hatred all the way across.
Spirit.
That is
And
just
of course,
murderous
like the
thing.
AIDS epidemic was like rampant. The ones that they would spare, they wanted to be tortured the rest of their lives. But yeah, so they're very broken people. Although you go and it's like there's a military genius running the country. He's a tyrant, and you know it's a safe country because he's got a really high and tight like stronghold on the country. But like the Rwandans feel like they're just robots. You know, they're just acting as the government wants them to. There's not real freedom there. There's no freedom of speech. Like when I'm there, I can't send an email mentions anything bad about Rwanda. Like people sometimes disappear if you do that.
Wow.
Or like the whole thing in Congo that was happening. I don't know if you knew that was
yeah.
Rwanda.
Oh, interesting.
But you know that from the ground, but you couldn't ever
Say
talk
it.
about it because there's not freedom of speech and your emails and everything is censored. So, but yeah. So you know it's safe as long as you are in the government's favor and you learn how to do that well enough.
Wow.
So yeah. So when we were there the first time in Rwanda, we were teaching English at a church, and so one of the days we were going to the church. I'll go to the next slide in a second. But one of the days we were going to the church, we hear like this little voice crying out, "Amafaranga," which is money. And we look over and there's like this little tiny 5-year-old who's got no shoes on, patch of missing like hair on his head from sleeping in the dirt, just filthy. This is a picture of him the first day we met him, and so he came over to ask us for money, but they told us don't give street kids money because they'll use it and they'll buy drugs and it'll just promote them to not be on the streets. So we're like, okay, I guess we shouldn't give them money. So I had bread in my bag and I hand it to them, and like the little 5-year-old grabs it, and then like 6-7 other street kids jump out of the bushes and they all like start eating the bread, and we're just like, oh my gosh. And Megan's like, Hillary, these kids are literally starving to death.
Yes.
Like, look at them.
My goodness.
So we took them up to a shop and we bought them bread. All of them had their own little loaf of bread, and we were very excited about that. And so that day, these are the kids that the day we first met them. And we continued seeing them all over the place because they lived next door to us in the street gutters. They sleep in street gutters at night for protection because they'll get beaten by police, or you know, sometimes they get killed by other street kids or other people who want something from them. They have a very bad reputation in Rwanda. They're very violent. They pretty much all of them, right when they get on the streets, they become sexually active, even at 5 years old. So that 5-year-old you saw was already sexually active, and most of it is homosexual sexual activity. So it's like a gang where the oldest are raping the younger
ones
on the streets.
My Lord.
And so it's a really, really awful, corrupt cycle that they get in right. Usually, you know, within the first week they're on the streets, they've already entered into like this
How many
broken
children
corruption.
end up like this? I mean, I know the population grows, but it's not planned, obviously.
Good
Well,
question.
when we went to Rwanda the first time, they estimated about 7,000 street kids in Rwanda and about 5,000 in the city itself. And so now that number has decreased because after we went there, we started a center and other places have started a center. So it's getting better. But Yeah, it was, at the time we went, I think it was the highest amount of street kids per capita in the world. And now India's
Is the highest.
the highest.
In other countries,
Mm-hmm.
horrible.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So we kept developing this relationship with the kids. They started calling us their parents.
Oh.
And we're like, oh my gosh, this is a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
I feel really awesome that you're calling me mom, but I can't just like leave you now, like knowing that we're the only ones that are showing you love. And it was cool to see like their trust start building, because initially they won't let you touch them, you know, like they're so hardened and they haven't been receiving love. So
Right.
yeah, seeing them start to like want to come up and hug us or something when they see us, like kind of a normal kid thing to do, started coming out. So before we left, we tried to partner them with like World Vision or another organization that could take care of them, but they didn't fit the requirements, which first requirement is you have to have a home, because they can't supervise where the funds are going unless it's like at least like almost like middle class Rwandan family.
That's so interesting
course.
because it's like, you know, people sign up to do World Vision, the poorest kids, but these kids don't even fit the poorest kids. I mean, they're the lowest of the low.
Yeah, and
Wow.
and Rwandans don't like these kids because they steal, they're violent, you know.
That's true. Yeah.
And so
No,
even the
it's-
Rwandans think of them as scum,
Mm-hmm.
which we're trying to change the
Mhm.
community's view of the children too.
These are orphans that the parents throw out, or the parents die, or how do they end up this way?
Some are orphans. All of the kids that we have met, they at least have a living relative that could take care of them, though. And so the reason most of them are on the streets is poverty. A lot of them think that they could go to this, you know, the city and life would be better than the poverty they're living in. Or sometimes parents actually force them to the streets to start begging, and then they stay on the streets. And then other times they just leave because they're being severely abused or neglected. And then some just have absolutely nowhere to go. And I suppose there's a small category of kids that are just disobedient and got in the wrong crowd and want to do drugs type of a thing. But that's not a very high percentage. I mean, there's not very many 10-year-olds that would get in the wrong crowd if they had a loving family that would want to sleep in street gutters.
That's true.
So, so we ended up partnering with these two women, Chantel and Josiane, and when we left, we were sending funds to help them continue like bringing food to these kids and clothing and different things. And then a month after we left, we got an email saying that all the boys had been arrested and put into prison because it's illegal in Rwanda to live on the streets. It's illegal not to own shoes. So like, there's a lot of things you can go to prison for there. So they went to get the boys out, and they told them that you can't take them out because you don't have a place to take them. And so that was the point where there was like the challenge point of like, okay, what are we going to do? And God just like really just ripped me a big one, like in December after I got back, because Megan was more the one that was just going at it. She's very optimistic. I'm very realistic. I'm like, we don't know what in the world we're doing. We're 20 years old. Like, how do we even know that, like, we can fully trust these women? Like, yes, we went to the church with them, but we don't know them that well, like, that they're going to do what they said. Like, we need to find, like, an organization here, and this is going to be, like, a lifetime sacrifice, probably, of what we're doing. Like, you know, just kind of all these things. Like, is this really possible to do it well?
Right.
And God just made it really clear, like, Hillary, I want you to stand up next to Megan, and I want you to go forward and start a place to take these kids. So we partnered with an organization here in Edmonds called Breakthrough Partners, and then rented out a home. And in March 2009, took 12 boys out of prison and began Hope for Life. So we hired staff to be their caregivers, and these are the kids right after coming out of the prison and getting new clothes. So they're
pretty excited about that.
they're
right?
excited. You can
Yeah.
tell some of them are just kind of like a little skeptical, like, all right. So now we've grown to have a capacity of 24 kids. We were given a grant, so we now have our own land and house. And let's see here. So we've grown to be more fold. Like initially we just had a center for street kids. And now we have an outreach program to local street kids, and then we are empowering the families to be able to take back their kids, and then we're sponsoring other vulnerable children. So in the residential program, you can see some of our pictures here. First of all, we want these kids to know who Christ is. We've seen in other non-Christian organizations, there's absolutely no change in the street kids. This is our house here. And like they'll go out and they'll steal their mattress and they go and sell it on the street and they buy drugs and they come back to the center. Or like they'll sexually molest others in the center or their staff. Like they bring their culture with them. And we found that when these kids come to know Christ and they change their identity from being a street child to being a Christian. And like that's the biggest thing to see change in these children. They all go to school, so some of the kids range from 5 to 14 we originally took in. So our 14-year-old started in first grade, so it's that's not really common or typical in Rwanda for 14-year-olds to be in first grade with 6-year-olds. But yeah, so they've been doing really well through school, even though they were made fun of at first. They've won the support of all their teachers, and a lot of them started Bible studies and different things with their classmates and just became leaders, and the teachers loved our kids. There's obviously some kids that were problems too, because they were troublemakers. But and so for the kids that for them to graduate from high school, they'll be 30. We want to help them do vocational training so that they can learn another skill. We want them all to get through the basic elementary skills so that they can write and do math, because you can't do vocational if you can't write or do math. Like those are just fundamental for being successful in anything.
Now you said what, at 30 they graduate from high school? Is that typically the age?
No, they typically graduate at 18.
Okay.
But if our kid is starting first grade as a teenager,
He can skip a few grades.
He could,
down, right?
Clep test him out.
Not real quick.
You didn't really do that in Rwanda.
Yeah.
For these kids, we did catch-up school for 6 months and then put them in. So some of them were able to get higher up. The education in Rwanda is very rote memory. And so it's not like practice skills. It's you need to go through the classes so you know what to memory write on everything.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So we could teach them practical skills and math and different things, but they kind of want to see the exact thing that's in their textbook done on the test rather than if they can find the answer. It's a horrible education system.
Wow.
Can you guys homeschool?
But we do a lot of schooling with the kids at the home.
Like tutoring, one-on-one.
Yeah, but to have our own school would be it'd be a whole nother program to start, and that's something maybe in the future we'll do. We've thought about creating a school, inviting neighbors to come and have actually a school that has high standards. But not yet. And it's really family focused. So there's 24 kids for capacity. We have a house parent on each side, and so that house parent oversees at max 12 kids, so they can have a more intimate relationship. We figured, hey, Jesus could only have a maximum of 12 disciples. We don't want these house parents to have more than 12 kids. And then we have...
That is,
I think 12 is a lot.
It is.
Mhm.
It is a lot.
So right now we're really small, so there's only 10 kids at the home, so each one has 5 kids.
right.
But yeah, and then there's other staff. So there's another live-in staff that helps, and then we have a total of 8 staff. So they at least get to spread out and help with the kids, and they spread out over all of them. so it's really cool too, seeing the kids like get stoked. Like you can just tell like how interested they're reading.
Yeah.
It's the Bible right there. They're just
Yeah.
super excited about reading the Word, and they love getting to get baptized. In Rwanda, it's a process of being a Christian for a while before they'll accept you to be baptized. So it's most of our boys have been baptized, and they love the Lord. A lot of them want to be pastors or start centers like we have, or gospel artists. So it's pretty cool. Like God's really worked in the lives of these kids.
That's terrific.
We like to do crafts and things with them.
Do you speak the language?
I speak a bit of it. It's a really hard language. They say it's
Do you have a translate?
one of the top 10 difficult
The
languages
most
in the world.
difficult. Wow.
So our staff, most of our staff speak English. So I use them as translators.
Yeah.
The kids, the schooling system is now in English, so our boys need to learn English so that they can do well in school. So some of them are decent in English, but so the two main things we want to teach them is computer science and English, because if they have those two, they're going to be able to get any job they want in Rwanda. They haven't developed much in computer programming or computer science, so there's huge opportunity for these kids if they learn like website design. Some things that we're thinking of doing in the future, like even like outsourcing from here to there or something to help raise support for their computer training.
What were the two things? English and computers?
English and computer science, so computer skills is what will make them the most business successful, at least. So we do an outreach program too. And so here's some of the kids that go to our outreach program. We average between 15 and 20 each Wednesday, and they come, they wash their clothes, and then we do a devotion with them and give them a meal. So I always get to share the gospel with them. It's cool to see their lives start transforming when they're part of the program. Like they really do start changing. Like even though they're still street kids, their violence is going down and their drug use and different things. And then through our council, a lot of the boys, like we actually used to have more kids come to our outreach, but now there's not as many kids in the area that are street kids, because through our council, we've been able to reconcile some of the kids with their parents, so they went back home. Or like Chantel, one of the co-founders, she's just awesome. She was asking the kids, she's like, so how many of you smoke? And they like all raise their hand. She's like, okay, how much does one cigarette cost? And they tell her, and they're like, how many do you smoke a day? And they tell her. So then she does the math with them, and she's like, so after a month, this is how much you spend on cigarettes. Do you know that you could rent out a small apartment for that amount each month and get off the streets? And they're like, oh, never thought of that. And so like 2 months later, we see 3 kids looking a little less dirty when they come, and you're like, hey guys, like,
you see this progression.
yeah, and so they started smoking half the amount and pulled up their money together and got off the streets. And now there's 6 kids that have stopped smoking, and they now are renting out apartments, and so they're not sleeping on the streets anymore. And so it's pretty cool, just like teaching them these basic things that they would never have thought about. And they earn money from begging and doing like odd jobs in the market is how they get the little money they have. But yeah, so it's cool. We don't have as many kids anymore coming to the outreach program because there's not as many that need it, which is neat.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
Mm-hmm. And
now,
yeah,
Hillary, what about
cute.
the young ladies, young girls? So you mainly mentioned that it's young boys. Is there like a bunch of young girls that are out on the streets too, or what's the orphanage?
I've only seen one straight girl in my time in Rwanda. Usually girls will stay in the situations they're in, or they can get jobs easier because people will hire them as like house girls that clean the house and help cook. So they're more apt to be taken into a home. But in an orphanage it's probably pretty even.
Okay.
But yeah, girls just don't stay on the streets, and I guess the ones that would, they would probably end up going to a brothel.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, we met boys first. We help we help girls by offering sponsorships to prevent them from needing to go to the streets.
Go to the streets, that's good, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the biggest way to help girls would probably be to go and work with prostitutes and help in that way. So.
Right.
That's how it was in Ethiopia.
Mhm.
They did an outreach there, and all the street kids were mostly guys, but the girls were the street girls that were working like prostitutes. But you didn't see too many of the street girls.
Yeah, you don't see that. The government officials are like, why don't you take in girls too? And they're like, oh, we don't want a mixed home.
Yeah, well,
We
that's
don't want to
true.
be
Yeah,
producing more kids.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
yeah, we're just
Better just to
Yep.
have an all boys home, right?
One or the other,
sticking
yeah.
with boys for now. And this boy was actually a street boy that his name is Twizerimana. He's Yaka, so he was raised Muslim, and he went to our outreach program, and so he accepted Christ through the outreach program. We started seeing change in his life. He stopped doing drugs and other things, and so then we accepted him into Hope for Life. So this is him after he came to Hope for Life. He's now been baptized too, and he's super excited and just sharing, like, he's talking to like his house parent, saying like, I've just been learning so much about God lately. When I read the Bible, it's just speaking to me. So it's pretty cool. So
Transformation.
he's 15.
He's 15.
14, 15.
Mm.
It's hard to figure out their true ages sometimes.
In both of those pictures, him?
So this is before and this is after.
Oh.
But yeah.
It's a huge difference. Didn't even look at the same
It-
voice.
I know, he
Would
didn't.
you say,
definitely
Hillary,
didn't
that most
smile
of these
before.
young boys are orphans? I mean, or what would you say now? When you first came, there was a lot of orphans because their parents or all their relatives were killed during the massacre. What about now? What are you seeing
the orphans
now?
are going to be those who are, let's see here, because there's like 19 years old and older are going to be the orphans.
Okay,
'cause-
because that was from that era, then, right?
Mm-hmm. And so probably street kids right now, 15% are orphans,
Okay,
but maybe 40% have one
one
parent
parent.
that's dead, and then maybe another like 20%, like pretty much all of them would be single parent households.
Okay.
Whether their father abandoned them or their mother did, or one of them is dead or one's in prison, and then there's the other 20% would be orphans that were living with aunts and uncles or
Right.
grandparents or something.
Right.
So the other big thing that we want to do is we want to reintegrate our boys, because we believe that just trying to fix the symptom, which is street kids, isn't enough. We wanted to do a holistic approach
Absolutely.
and go to the root of the problem, which is their families, of why they had to go to the street. So we've been working with the families the last 4 years, and have this last year really instigated a real program of empowering the families. And so last year we reintegrated 12 kids back into their families, and we've been following up.
Fantastic.
To do so, like if you see some of these houses and stuff, they're pretty shabby. It's pretty hard for our boys who have been living at a nice center to go back to somewhere where there's a dirt floor and no toilet and leaking roof, or maybe no door. So what we did this last Christmas is we raised money to do some really basic renovations on the houses so that it was actually safe for these kids to go home. And, we cemented the walls, we cemented the floors, we put a door on and gave them new roofs and different things. And it's still, they're living at a low standard, but it was a livable standard.
Sure. Definitely an improvement.
So that's what we did before we sent the kids home, which was awesome.
That is great.
It was, some of them were initially they're kind of sad to leave Hope for Life. But we had a huge party, and we all shared about each of the kids, and they all shared about each other and the testimonies, and it's just really cool. That's probably my biggest highlight was this last year, seeing all the kids share about
testimony.
their testimony of how they've changed from being at Hope for Life, and then all the boys sharing about their friends who are going home and encouraging them, and they were all you know, just keep on praying, keep on going to church, keep on loving God, and you'll get through everything. You know, like it's just. It was kind of like the summer camp high, you know,
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
when all the
Yeah.
kids are like just so stoked
Ready
for
to
God.
go.
Like that's
Yeah.
what they were at, and it's
That's
so
cool.
cool. Like I'm like, man, these kids just have such a solid faith, and it's so neat to see. And you know, we talk to them too, like about how they're lights to their family, and we're stoked to go and really bring their families to know the Lord too.
Great. That's so good. That is so good.
Yeah, and
It's
so
a total transformational thing too. I mean, you're not just ministering to their spiritual needs. You're working with them, their families, their friends, their homes, their jobs. I mean, it's a like you were saying before, Hillary. It's a holistic approach that you guys are doing.
and you need to do
You're
it
doing
that
it right.
way, or like you see the people that have just like soup kitchen type things where they help give street kids food. There's not real transformational change. Like you need to address people's physical and their spiritual and their emotional, because we're a whole people and it affects us. Like so yeah, we've seen a lot of great fruit from trying to approach each angle. The other thing we're doing now is working with families and teaching them income generation skills, because we're giving sponsorships to the kids that are in their homes, but we want to wean them off of our support and have them be able to take care of their own kids. So all the people that we renovated their houses, they've all agreed to join savings groups through another organization, International Hope, and so it's kind of like their own like little local bank, and they're all encouraging each other, and they all have to like take finance management classes and put a certain amount into the savings group, and then it can like act as like investments and different things.
Sure.
And then the families that write up business plans for how they want to like start maybe some like farming endeavor or a little shop will help them get something like that started and oversee it with them. So we've done that with 2 families with farms so far, and are planning on continuing to help them because we want to see these families successful.
Yes.
How's their drinking water over there?
It's you can't drink it out of the tap. It's got parasites in it. So that's another thing. This summer we want to bring water filters to all of the families. There's like an organization that has like a generator fueled one, and you can pump it, and it has the UV lights as long as you pump it, and it will filter the water. So
What do you guys do now?
well, at our home we have filters. So we have one of those, and then we also have one that has like the little filter candles, but you have to change them every 3 months or so. So I have a feeling the families wouldn't if they had to. If they just have to clean out a filter and it keeps on lasting forever,
Yeah, probably do that more.
they'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. I can show you a video.
Yes.
Brittany, where's the popcorn?
I know. Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. What's the average age? Are you looking anywhere from, how many do you see that are younger than 5 and say?
We've never taken in a kid younger than 5, but we've had
Okay.
several 5-year-olds. And now one of our boys is actually 20. Because we've been doing, so we met him 5 years ago and he's 15.
Wow, he's been with you for 5 years. That's fantastic.
Do families ever come to you with their kids and say, "Can you take care of my kids?" Because you're doing such a great job, and they see something, or is that like, are you just like getting the street kids?
Well, we don't want families to do that. Like, so sometimes families, like, will have, like, one of their siblings, and then they try to get us to take the rest of their kids. And that's part of empowering the families, is helping them understand their responsibility and how important it is that they parent their kids. Because, you know, kids growing up in an institute with caregivers that are coming and going, like, it's, no matter how well you're doing it, it's not as good as having a stable family. And also, then they have connections, too, that they make. Because it's hard to reintegrate when you have no connections. It's hard to get a job if you have no references. And, like, so much of getting a job in Rwanda is networking. and through people, someone recommending you that knows someone that works somewhere, but you don't have that when you're a street kid and you have this bad reputation.
That's true.
Too, that's hard to get past.
Here at Hope for Life, we are putting together a Christmas project for the boys who are being reintegrated into their families. Help us meet their needs this holiday season.
Yeah. After 4 years of being with the street kids and providing almost everything they need, we found it wise to send some of them home, because some of them have good families, but the problem is just poverty. As we are visiting families, we are encountering so many problems because the life condition in their homes is not really good, and it's really hard for the boys to restart the same lives they left before. So we would like to help them because their life condition is really bad. Some don't have any roof, other roofs are leaking. Some boys don't have any place where to sleep, so we need to build new bedrooms for them. We need for some to put some cement on their houses because they are falling down, and so many other things.
My name is Veteran.
My name is Simeon.
My name is Patrick.
I don't have a bed.
I have nowhere to sleep.
My house needs cement and kitchen.
My house needs a roof.
I need a bedroom.
These families are in great need, and we are hoping to raise $5,000 in order to change their standard of living. Check out our website to choose from specific gifts you can bless these families with and their children this Christmas.
Thank you!
My baby, piku piku, my baby.
Umunyagiciro kinini, umunyagiciro kinini, umunyagiciro kinini, mana yanjye umunyagiciro kinini, umunyagiciro kinini, umunyagiciro kinini kuri njyewe. Umunsi wa mbere mbonekera wasaga n'izuba rirashe, umutima wanjye ukurabutswe, mana numva ndanezerewe, mpitamo utazakureka keretse ntarakumenye, mpitamo utazakureka keretse ntazi imbaraga zawe. nshaka